Olkhovatka was not famous because of a single dramatic tank charge or one unforgettable image. Its importance came from ground, vision, and the hard military fact that height can decide what an army can see, hit, and control. On the northern face of the Kursk salient, the area around Olkhovatka and nearby ridges became critical because German forces needed more than a foothold in the Soviet defenses. They needed commanding ground that could help unlock further movement toward the south. The Soviets understood this clearly. Kursk was not only a battle of armor against armor. Around Olkhovatka, it became a contest over observation, artillery control, approach routes, and the ability to turn a local rise in the terrain into operational resistance. If you would like to move beyond the podcast, you can see my available books at militaryauthor.me. And at trackpads.com, you will find magazines and galleries with hundreds of thousands of photos and videos to explore. For a listener without a map, the key is to imagine the northern battlefield as a series of approaches leading into a defended interior. The Germans were attacking southward from the Ural region into the top of the Kursk Bulge. Ahead of them lay not one wall, but belts of Soviet defenses arranged across villages, ridges, fields, and roadways. Olkhovatka lay in a sector where the ground offered observation over surrounding approaches. That made it valuable out of proportion to its size. A hill or ridge in this kind of battle was not scenery. It was a platform for artillery observers, a shield for reverse slope positions, a guide for movement, and a barrier that could keep an armored attack from developing freely. The German need for the Olkhovatka area came from the logic of the northern pincer. Model's Ninth Army had to break through Rokossovsky's central front and keep moving south if Operation Citadel was to succeed. If the Germans could seize key high ground, they might improve observation, disrupt Soviet artillery control, and open routes deeper into the salient. That was the operational hope. But hope became difficult on a battlefield prepared precisely to make such gains costly. Soviet commanders had studied the likely axes of attack and understood that the Germans would need to dominate the heights, not merely pass between them. At Kursk, the shape of the land told both sides where the struggle would concentrate. The Soviet defense around Olkhovatka used the terrain as part of the weapon system. Trenches and gun positions could be placed to cover slopes and approaches. Anti-tank guns could wait for vehicles to expose themselves while climbing, turning, or emerging from dead ground. Artillery could be registered on roads, assembly areas, and likely forming up points. Infantry strongpoints could hold villages and field positions that protected the guns and blocked easy movement. Minefields added uncertainty to every route. The important point is that these elements were connected. A minefield without fire might only delay. A gun without infantry protection might be overrun. A ridge without reserves behind it might fall and become useless. Around Olkhovatka, Soviet strength lay in the combination. The fighting in this sector showed how hard it was for armor to overcome prepared high ground. Tanks are powerful, but they are not equally powerful in every setting. A vehicle climbing or moving through a channeled approach may have limited visibility and fewer options for maneuver. If it stops to engage one threat, another may appear from a flank or from behind cover. If it pushes ahead without infantry, it risks entering ground that has not been cleared. If it waits for infantry and engineers, the attack loses tempo. German armored crews could fight skillfully and still find that the terrain and defensive system robbed them of the clean conditions in which armor performs best. Artillery was especially important around Olkhovatka because height and observation were closely linked. An observer who can see an approach road, a ridgeline, or a concentration of vehicles can help bring fire down where it matters. Conversely, a force that loses observation may find itself firing blindly or reacting too late. This is why armies fight so hard over ground that may look unimpressive to a civilian eye. A rise of land can determine whether movement is concealed or exposed. It can decide whether guns are firing on guessed positions or measured targets. Around Olkhovatka, control of high ground meant control over the tempo of the fight, because artillery could slow, scatter, or punish German attempts to regroup for the next push. German attacks toward the Olkhovatka heights involved armor, infantry, engineers, and artillery trying to work together under punishing conditions. The Germans still possessed tactical skill, and their units were capable of applying heavy pressure at selected points. But the northern face had already become a battle in which pressure did not automatically become movement. Soviet defenses forced attackers to clear obstacles, fight for intermediate positions, and reorganize after each gain. Heavy vehicles and assault guns could provide powerful fire, but they could not by themselves occupy and secure the ground needed for further advance. That remained an infantry and engineer problem as much as an armored one. The result was repeated effort against a defensive system designed to make every effort partial. Soviet commanders did not rely only on static defense. Reserves, counterattacks, and artillery shifts helped keep the Olkhovatka sector from becoming a German opening. Counterattacks in this environment were rarely simple. They could be costly, confused, and limited in what they physically regained. But their function was often to interrupt German consolidation, force attacking units to turn and respond, and prevent a local success from becoming a stable platform for the next advance. The Red Army's goal was to preserve the integrity of the defensive depth. Even when German units took ground, Soviet pressure could make that ground difficult to use. At Kursk, holding a ridge mattered, but being able to exploit it mattered even more. Olkhovatka also helps explain why the northern attack lost operational meaning. The Germans needed to create a breakthrough that opened the way southward, but the fight for high ground consumed time and strength. The more the battle centered on ridges, slopes, strong points, and artillery observation, the farther it moved away from the fast double envelopment imagined by Operation Citadel. Model could continue to apply force, but force was being absorbed. A tank formation that spends its strength fighting over defended heights is not racing toward an encirclement. It is being made to pay for the privilege of standing where the defender has prepared the next line of resistance. This was exactly the Soviet intention. The contrast between Ponieri and Olkhovatka is useful because each shows a different way to kill momentum. Ponieri was close, claustrophobic, and settlement-centered. A fight where rail structures, buildings, trenches, and rubble pulled the battle inward. Olkhovatka was about height, field of fire, and observation. A fight where the open ground could be just as dangerous as the village street, because so much of it could be watched and shelled. In both places, the lesson was the same. German armored warfare needed movement that widened into operational freedom. Soviet defensive warfare aimed to prevent that widening. Whether in a village or on a ridge, the defender's job was to turn advance into friction.
The human experience around Olkhovatka was shaped by exposure. Soldiers on slopes, in trenches, near gun positions, or moving across open approaches faced shellfire, machine guns, mines, and the constant danger of being seen before they could see the enemy. Tank crews worked inside hot, noisy machines with limited visibility, trying to identify threats that could come from concealed positions or from artillery they could not fight directly. Infantrymen had to advance or hold under fire that made the landscape feel measured and watched. Artillery crews fired until forced to shift, hide, or survive counterfire. This was not the cinematic drama of tanks charging across open ground. It was the relentless danger of a battlefield where every visible movement might draw fire.
In the larger story of armored warfare, Olkhovatka teaches that terrain is not background. It is part of the battle's machinery, which can matter as much as a famous tank model if it controls observation and movement. A slope covered by mines and guns can neutralize speed more effectively than a head-on armored duel. Kursk is remembered for massive numbers and famous vehicles, but places like Olkhovatka show the campaign's deeper structure. The Red Army did not defeat the Northern Pincer by one dramatic stroke. It defeated it by using ground, depth, fire, and reserves to deny the Germans the operational freedom they required. Olkhovatka deserves its place in the Kursk sequence because it reminds us that armored warfare is a contest over conditions. The Germans brought force, skill, and armored power to the northern face, but they needed terrain that could be converted into movement. The Soviets turned that terrain into observation posts, fire zones, defensive belts, and delay. Height was power because it helped decide who could see, who could shoot, who could move, and who had to stop. By holding and contesting the ground around Olkhovatka, the Red Army helped ensure that the Northern Pincer would not become the fast arm of a decisive encirclement. The battle there was not the most famous scene at Kursk, but it was one of the places where the campaign's central truth became visible. Tanks matter, but the ground they fight over can matter just as much.
You've been listening to Famous Tank Battles. These battles were never just about machines. They were about doctrine, terrain, firepower, logistics, and the hard problem of turning shock into victory. For more military history writing and books, visit militaryauthor.me. And for magazines, podcasts, and a massive archive of military photos and video, visit trackpads.com. Thanks for listening.